where businesses make money by capturing your attention, and technology is now accelerating at a rate faster than we know how to adapt to it. So how do we actually model good behavior in this age of distraction and misinformation? And that's really what I've been focused on.
Hey, my name is Deanna Lambson, and I'm a mother of 6, and 5 boys and 1 girl. And I was a teacher for several years, and then in the PTA for a number of years, and just realized that all the things that we care about in the PTA, we care about kids wearing their helmets on their bikes. We care about whether or not they breathe clean air and whether or not they're saving the earth, and we care about whether or not they read enough, all these things. But I thought, wow, and of course we care, Red Ribbon Week, we care about whether or not they take drugs or alcohol, and I realized that nothing affects every single child in a school like technology. Every single one, there's not a single child that doesn't affect. And it felt like we were spending a disproportionate amount of time on other issues and not some of the things that were really critical to their day-to-day choices. And so just began by developing a White Ribbon Week for our own local school that was called I've Got the Power, and it kind of spread with the help of many who believed in what we were doing. It spread to the district and the state PTA, and now we have a nonprofit so that we can share that. And there are 4 different week-long programs that are intended to help kids. We try not to tell them what to think, but how to determine for themselves what sort of media helps their life be more fulfilling and more healthy. So that's what we do, and it's very exciting and continually an adventure. So.
My name is Kristen Jenson, and I am the founder of ProtectYoungMinds.org. And it's a website to give practical tools for raising porn-proof kids. And so we have a lot of free guides and information. I'm also the author of this book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And I didn't begin my life as a child wanting to do what I do today. I didn't have that goal, right? But I got a phone call from a mother who was in trauma because her oldest son had been consuming pornography, and then unfortunately he had started acting out on his younger brothers and sisters. So I woke up the next morning and I just felt compelled to look for a resource to help parents talk to their young children at an early age, because young children have access to technology, the good and the bad, and to help them make better choices. So the book is really a conversation between parents and a child, and modeling a parent describing what pornography is, why it's harmful or can become an addiction, and what a child can do to respond, kind of like a plan for what a child can do when they see bad pictures. And I've got free screen cleaners if anybody wants them for your phone.
What did you ask? What was the name of the book? Somebody asked that, I think.
Protect Young Minds is
So Protect Your Minds
Yeah.
is the companion website, and then the book is, and we also have a book. So this is for like 7 to 11, and then we have a book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, for 3 to 6. So it's just a much more simple. But we sold out at our last conference, and this is all I have.
It's a good problem.
So I have this copy if someone wants it. Otherwise, I'm sure I will give it away on the plane tomorrow. As I always do.
I'm Felicia Rateliff. Firstly, I am the mother of 4 daughters ranging, well, they're 19, 23, 25, and almost 27. I have 2 stepchildren, 10 and 11, and a 4-year-old and 20-month-old granddaughters.
Wow.
Lots of kids. Yeah. Secondly, I am an educator. I taught in a technology-based high school for 8 years, and I taught graphic arts, design and printing. And then also, I work now for a nonprofit called iKeepSafe, and we provide data privacy information to educators and parents, and data privacy certifications to technology companies to ensure that they comply with data privacy laws. In between there, I've also worked in digital citizenship initiatives. I've worked with an tech company. Some of you guys, the Imperial Software was one of our sponsors, and I worked with them. So in essence, well, and I have to also add that way before all of that, I was a graphic designer and a commercial artist originally, so before technology, and then moved into technology. So you could say I've been involved in technology on an early level from a very long time, and then dealt with it on a parenting level, and an education level, and a business level, and a nonprofit level. So that's where my background comes from to add to the conversation.
My name is Ethan Fausett. I'm a son, and so I'm almost 20 years old at this point. So coming out of the youth end of things, I was very inundated with technology growing up. Played lots of video games and just spent a lot of time with technology, just because I was fascinated by it. But I'm also a trained mentor and speaker with an organization called Lionheart Mentoring that's by youth and for youth to help teach young men and women how to essentially make choices, if that makes sense. Teaches them that they are valued, that they are a hero in their own right. And we have like fun concepts that we like to teach at our events. But essentially, we like to teach them how to choose to be free is one of our biggest things. And that includes choosing to be free of addictive tendencies, which is something that I developed growing up because I got really isolated, just playing video games all the time. And so I went back to the computer games, and it ended up turning into a pornography addiction, which I've only really begun to, well, I'm going on an LDS mission soon, which I couldn't personally go on if I didn't overcome that. And so over this last year, I did overcome it. And it was because I started to realize that the opposite of addiction is actually connection. And so in order to overcome that, I had to figure out how to use technology correctly and how to sometimes not use it and connect with people so that way I could overcome an addiction. And I've been able to tell that story to youth all along the Wasatch Front here in Utah, in high schools and in various events. And I've had dozens of teenagers reach out to me, and I've been able to direct them to various resources so that way they could overcome pornography addiction as well, because unfortunately it's extremely widespread among youth today. Extremely widespread.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask for start at this end, go back. Can you tell them a little bit more first about what you shared about your story and the role that Facebook played?
Yeah,
and then okay, start there, and then I'll just pose another question. We'll go back.
Yeah, so fun thing. I actually want to talk to you. Were you at the World Congress of Families? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was actually one of the youth that helped organize that event, and I was there. And so you said Big Ocean Women, and I was like, I remember that. But yeah, I was at that event, and there was a panel with the founders of Fight the New Drug and Operation Underground Railroad. And during that panel, I just had this thought pop into my head that if I ever wanted to overcome the addiction that I had to pornography, that I would have to at some point post on Facebook and basically open up to everybody, regardless of what the consequences were, which I couldn't control. I couldn't control how other people reacted to it, but I knew that that was something that I had to do. And so fast forward like a year, I went to a Lionheart event because I'm really good at doing stuff quickly. I was at a Lionheart event, and I made various stuff happen. Basically, I realized I had to choose to love myself as a person, because the thing is with this kind of addiction is I hated myself for a really long time. I saw myself as a monster. And that led to things like me not going on dates with girls, because I figured, you know what, they deserve somebody better than me. But at this event, I chose to love myself, and later I was at an LDS church-sponsored 12-step group for men who are recovering from pornography addiction. And in the group, there was a guy who shared how he had posted on Facebook, and it just like clicked. I was like, oh yeah, I remember how I had that thought, I have to do that. And time passed again, but I eventually, basically, well, not too much time, but like after a week, I was, after the same 12-step group, I decided I'm not leaving this parking lot until I post on Facebook, because I know that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I sat in my car for 45 minutes and I typed out this long post. And it just went over whole things where, this is what I'm dealing with, but I know that if I keep it inside of me, it'll continue to have power over me, so I'm letting it go. And I'm searching for help and making all the actions that I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm following I'm a religious person, so I'm following what I believe God wants me to do right now. And I also said, and if you're dealing with this as well, let's reach out to me if you feel like that's what you need to do, and I can share with you what I've done. And if not, reach out to somebody, because this is something that you shouldn't have to deal with, and we need to all overcome it together. And after that, I pressed post, and I had no idea what was going to happen. Not a single piece of negative feedback, not one. And it was just absolutely amazing. And that happened through Facebook.
It's amazing. I wanted to say something about that, about you, about things that I've heard. So, something that was said several times within the conference with, I'm going to forget his name now, that did the preventative.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes. Was talking about that the loneliness factor has gone up with, and I'm pretty sure that the statistics were not just with youth; it was with people. Because I think it was the same with the drugs and other things. And I think it was like a 40-year-old male or something. And what you said at the beginning of your introduction about yourself was because you were in isolation. It started with you being on video games. And this is something that I feel in parenting I've seen, and also in my own life, as technology has spiked, I feel. With having the kids the ages that I do, 27 to 19, my biological children, my older children were in the earlier stages where, iPhones came out and they thought it was cool, but they already had the social network. They already, that was just a fun thing. And their online presence was a fun thing. And you move down in the ages to the 23-year-old and the 19-year-old, and between those two, they will tell you in varying degrees, my youngest 19-year-old being the most, the highest degree of isolation because of social media or because of being on the online things. And that's because the shift in our, in just our culture of things. And that's disturbing as a parent, and it's important to think about. And also, you were talking about when you told us we needed to sit down and actually talk amongst our, talk where everyone could hear us, is that our ability to be present for our kids has also shifted because we have, our work comes to us when it's not work time. Our, responsibilities are there all the time because we can connect via outside, via online activities, and our own social activities can be there all the time. So we as parents aren't taking sometimes enough time to connect. And so all of those things they're very upsetting in some ways, and it makes you upset as a parent, it makes you think, and it makes you kind of can freak out. But also what you said about how you used the technology to help. So when you're an isolated person, you also understand that there are other ways to connect besides the people that you may not have near you to help yourself. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind as parents, is that one, we need to teach our children how to connect in real life. Two, we need to connect and realize ourselves in front of our kids. And three, we need to realize that we can talk to our kids about using this online world as a connection that helps themselves in real life, and put it all together as one big thing.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go, Ethan, if you could start by sharing tell us what something
Totally not what I thought I was going to share, so sorry.
You're fine. No, those are great thoughts. Can you share a thought from the conference? Like, what's a takeaway? That's the word I'm looking for. What's a takeaway from the summit? And we'll go down the row and let everybody do that.
Yeah, one of the takeaways that I noticed is the people that I talked to, the theme seemed fairly prevalent, that The focus needs to be on how to teach, on teaching people how to use technology better. And specifically, a lot of the thoughts that I had along those lines is we need to be able to equip parents and teachers, but in my mind, parents take a slightly higher precedence, just because they're the ones that are closest to the kids, or should be closest at least. If we can equip parents to be able to teach their kids how to use technology side by side with them, I feel like that would probably bring the greatest benefit. Because the fact is, I learned how to use technology mostly on my own. I was taught how to make websites and stuff by my dad when I was 8. But aside from that, I played video games, and I started going on YouTube and looking at tutorials how to program and stuff. But I learned a lot about computers. I love technology, but I did it pretty much all on my own, and it was something that I did on my own. I wanted to do on my own, and I didn't really want to do when my parents were around. And it's not like I was doing anything bad at first, but it was my thing. And so because it started that way, it's just kind of stayed that way. And so to break that cycle, it was really tough. And so I think to an extent, the teenagers today that are already embroiled with this, a lot of them are going to have to go through a similar process that I did. But if from now on we can start equipping parents to work with their kids and learn side by side with them, and then that'll make a huge difference.
Thank you. Felicia?
Okay, what I got from the conference?
Yeah, okay, just a key takeaway.
A huge thing that I got from the conference was that we still need to really think about communicating with each other and communicating with schools and communicating with our kids about technology, because even though it's become so widespread, it's really inundated our lives and our kids' lives, but I feel like we're not at the level yet where we just talk about it as much as we should. And I think that what I saw with young people telling what they did with technology, the really cool things that they thought of on their own to do with technology, I really kind of felt a little guilty. I think maybe my kids might have done some really cool stuff like that and maybe not even told me, because they thought, it's just fun stuff you do, and it's not, And I'm wondering how many things kids do with their tech all the time that they don't think is significant, but if they told us about it or we asked them about it, we would be like, oh my God, they did this cool thing. Yeah. So I realized communication is so much more important than we think.
You can bring in those opportunities for positive recognition too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Kristen.
So I would say, unfortunately, I was in another part of Utah when Dr. Hawkins was speaking. So
But you were there for part of it. So
I flew in and came on Thursday afternoon, and I really enjoyed Jake Schroeder's presentation this morning. And it really, my wheels in my brain were spinning, because what I am trying to do is help parents tackle some of these conversations and begin to work with children, because children, the allure of technology is so great. The instant gratification is so great, but they haven't learned to have the brakes. And so in many ways, the parents have to be the prefrontal cortex for the kids as the kids mature, and then their prefrontal cortex comes into play, and they gain strength, and they gain balance, and they gain maturity and the ability to use technology for good and not just react to everything that they see online. So my purpose is, obviously I'm focusing on pornography because that is really one of the more severe problems that come out of access. But he made me, as I was thinking about his, the jobs,
jobs to be done.
Jobs to be done theory, and really figuring out the motivation and what people are trying to do so that then you can help that along. That's what I'm really concerned about, because I want to help parents and kids. What motivates a 9-year-old? What motivates a 10-year-old to make certain decisions. So I'd love to talk with you, or at least get your contact information.
Probably Minecraft Let's Players is what influenced them the most.
Minecraft, yes, my kids love Minecraft. So, I think that was one of the things that.
That's what worked out.
He perked up. Minecraft. So, I think that, yeah. So I think that is one of the things that I'm gonna be, and in fact, I went up and I talked to him, and I'm gonna be in touch with him and beg him for free business consulting. Anyway, I really think that we all have to, like, if we're trying to be influencers, we have to use, I think, that model to see where people are going and to help them along their way. And I'm still not totally clear on it, but I know there's something to what he was saying.
Thank you. Deanna?
I think really the biggest thing for me, and Jan and I had been to a meeting the day before the summit started, and there were, it started to just really resonate with me then, and it was really came out of this, and that is, I kind of boiled everything down to, if we set all the standards and the clear expectations in the world, but we don't have a relationship with our children, it won't do any good.
Yes.
And that was the biggest, and it's a no-brainer, but it's also an aha, because you think that, well, I have a good enough relationship, but I've got to set the rules, right? I've got to, and it was, it just really came clear of, the rules will work if you focus on this other. And people ask me a lot, because I have some really terrific kids, as we all do. I mean, kids are awesome. And people say, oh, what do you do? How do you get them to practice it? And I go, you know what, you're talking to like the worst parent in the world in setting rules and boundaries, because I'm so inconsistent and all these things. But they know that I love them. They know I am absolutely their #1 fan. And it actually is very comforting to me, and what's the word, empowering to me, because sometimes we are scared as parents of, how am I going to do everything right? How am I going to say everything right? How am I going to talk to them at the right ages about the right things? How am I going to word it? How am I going to make sure they listen to me when they're teenagers? And it's just like, oh, I can just breathe a sigh of relief and go home and love them and play with them. And that is just like my biggest aha, whether it's at school or at home. And we talked a lot at the conference about involving kids in the process of creating, of solving, of all those things. And I know that we preach it, and I thought, am I living it at home? And I think that I do, but I went home tonight, I had a few hours in between. I went home and I thought, as a mother, I am the queen. I kind of say, this is what we will do. This is what we will have for dinner. This is what we will do for the weekend. This is when you will go to bed. This is when that's what we do as mothers, as parents. And I thought, can I step back from that and say, these are the things I think need to get done. What do you think needs to get done? How would you like to do it? Maya, what would you like to do tonight? What are you looking forward to this weekend? How can I? It was a different conversation when I went home tonight. And that's exciting to me, because that I can do. And I may not be perfect at doing all these other things, but I can connect with them, I can love them, I can listen to what they care about, and let the other things fall into place. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said.
yeah. Do you see this over here too?
Yeah, some good agreement over here.
Youth perspective.
I'll give my point in a second, but yeah, I think ultimately everything comes down to the fact that people don't like to be told what to do all the time, and kids are told what to do all the time, and it takes away your sense of self, and it takes away your agency. And so when it comes to something like technology, when is it that you do feel like you have agency in your life? Well, when I have this device, I have complete control.
Yeah.
I have access to my friends. I have access to these games. I can learn a bunch of cool things that I never would have otherwise learned about. But, if I haven't developed that strong sense of self, well, maybe I will get validation from how many likes my picture got on it or what somebody said about something that happened. So, I think the more opportunities that kids have to be able to have choice and make decisions, the better. Going back to what I was going to say for my insight of the conference is, something, well, obviously I preach a lot about happiness, and there was a 75-year study that came out through Harvard, and the key finding in terms of happiness was people who have good relationships live happier, healthier, longer lives. So good relationships being people that you can depend on, that are your support system, that will help you if you're in need, that give you unconditional love. And it is really hard to build those relationships, especially once you get married and have kids and you maybe don't live in the area that you grew up in. And, the way I'm tying this back to what I learned at the conference is in that last session that we did on building that intentional network, I've been so focused on building that intentional network of people and how everything is so connected that I haven't been focusing on, building those deep and cultivating those really solid relationships, which is ultimately what I'm talking about. The way I sort of made an analogy of it is, I've been focusing so much on planting all of these good seeds, but I haven't been spending time actually watering those seeds and waiting for them to germinate and turn into something beautiful. That was something that I did some reflecting on, and I know I have more notes in my notebook that I want to go back and take a look at as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, Carolina.
I love everything that's been said. I think the takeaway that I've gotten is very, very personal. And so I've loved everything that's been shared, and I know that I will draw upon all of this information as it comes up. But I think attending this conference, I think I just had lots of questions, and I was eager to learn just as a parent. And I think I find it very challenging to, and I shared this before, but just to be at this time, a mother at this time, because there's so much pulling at me from all these different directions. It's, parenting today is really, really hard because we're navigating all of this uncharted territory, and we have so many environmental hazards that I don't think we're around. We have health allergies, we have, predators, child predators, and just the technology, all of these different things that you have to be vigilant of as a parent. And then on top of that, you're still, to be a responsible, global citizen, you have to engage and try to make a difference and do good in the world on top of all of that. And so you just feel very torn, and I think that as a mother that I'm trying to model, right, how to be a light in the world, but sometimes I'm just what am I doing? I'm just trying to survive myself. And so, and as a nonprofit, leader, you're just and then you've got work on top of that. And so, anyway, my takeaway has just been very, very personal, that I have to take all of this information and apply it in my life every day. And I need to do that with this internal compass that I know is in me and that I know how to do. I just have to allow and kind of surrender my anxiety, in a sense, to the hope that everything will be okay. And I feel really, really grateful. For example, today, I surrendered my desire to want to come to the conference. I could have made it happen, but I surrendered that, and I said, you know what? I'm going to practice what I preach. I want to build an attachment with my kids at a time, and actually, I'm going to be really vulnerable right now. I came home from the conference yesterday, and 2 of my 6 had to be watched by someone because my husband has to work. So
I came home and my little daughter Hannah looked at me and said, Mom, I'm sad that you have to go all day tomorrow. And I just said, you know what, this is that moment of surrendering, not trying to juggle everything. I said, Hannah, do you know what, I'm gonna scrap it. I'll make a way. So yes, little Eve was a little bit sick, but I could have muscled through because I'm really good at muscling through. But I said, no, what do you want to do tomorrow? Mom, I want to ride bikes. Okay. I tucked him in bed. If I were to have planned to come to a full day, I would have had to pack a bag for baby Eve. I would have had to get all of these other things, but because I decided to surrender, I read him stories late at night, tucked him in bed, and said, well, when I wake up, what are we all gonna do? You know, let's. And so my day was just filled. It has just filled me with joy. And so I think we all have this internal compass, and that's what we're all talking about, is how to be filters, how to instill that in children. But if we don't do it ourselves, we don't know what we're doing to be able to teach them. And I think that that's really the key, is just to follow this internal compass that we all have, to know when to self-regulate, to know that when we've been on there too long. And when our children see us doing that, we're teaching them something so valuable that, you could write volumes, but just in showing them, it's very simple and intuitive. And I think that gives me tremendous hope. And it makes me feel like I can continue on doing all of these, juggling all of these balls. Because sometimes I just second guess myself and feel like I just want to drop them all. But if you can walk this beautiful tightrope, and just have your eyes centered, and just listen to that internal compass, then you can do lots of things that are very pressing. You can parent well, you can parent deliberately, you can run a nonprofit, you can be a good global citizen and a digital citizen, and all of these other things that we're being kind of called to do. And so I think that's been my takeaway, is that it's just been very, very personal, and to trust, and anyway, that's what I've gotten from it.
I'm just gonna kind of be organic here, so we had a question over here.
Yeah, so my mom is Purpose-Driven Motherhood, Becky Edwards, and she did something on your book, and she read it to all of us, and I loved it. But I have a question for you, and I'm sorry, I don't remember names, but you two, yes, you two.
Let's name names, because we're actually
Kristen.
audio recording this, so as you're speaking, this is Kristen.
Jenson,
And Deanna Lambson.
Yeah, so Kristen and Deanna. So I love my mom to pieces, but I'm trying to learn from her and be a better mom. And I want to know how to organically love my kids so that how do I word that? Like what you said, how you want to teach parents how to help their kids and everything, but still have that it's a boundary, but not something to be suffocated by. Does that make sense? And I know that there were times in my life that I felt really suffocated by all the rules, and I forgot that my mom loved me. Does that make sense? And I want to know how to just be a mom and not have. Does that make sense? I don't want my mom to feel. I don't want my kids to feel suffocated by me.
You want the bonding to
Exactly.
be before the boundaries.
Exactly.
That's the
The
prevention
boundary.
science model, bonding before the boundaries.
Yeah, the boundary is because I love them, not because they have to follow a rule. Does that make sense? I don't want them. Yeah.
So you're looking for their thoughts
First
on
of
that?
Yeah,
all, first of all, I always taught my kids, you just need to be better than your parents, and it will be hard. And if every generation gets a little better, then the world will get a little better. So that was the bar I set for my kids, which actually wasn't a very tall bar. But I really would go back to what, that relationship, and then the rules, and then the monitoring. I love that. You are going to be able to do this because you're thinking about it now. But you're going to have to be in the lab and then conscious of it, and every child is going to be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So you are going to be able to do this, and you will learn and remember your own experience, But parents feel a huge sense of responsibility. And they have to launch these kids into a world that's changed drastically. And so there's a lot of fear. And so you make these rules, right? And so you're like, and so I think pulling away from the fear and kind of being able to say, okay, I'm gonna let them make mistakes, and it's not gonna reflect on me. I'm not gonna be seen as the worst parent, or I'm not gonna think of myself as this slacker parent. But my kids, I would do these programs like, okay, all right, now we have a program. The program is, leave no trace behind. So if you go to a room and you leave that room, I don't want to know you've been in that room. I don't want to have your candy wrappers there. I would do this. And I would monitor. And my kids always knew 2 weeks, and then I'd forget about it. So they'd be just like, okay, 2 weeks, it'll be all over. We'll just put up with Mom for 2 weeks, it'll be over. So, yeah, I was inconsistent. But you know what, my kids turned out pretty good, and yours will too. I think just with that, the whole thing of establish a relationship, and what Caroline was saying, sometimes you just have to make those choices of, you can't do everything. So sometimes you're gonna choose to do things that your kids are gonna be deprived, right? They're not gonna have their mom because you've gotta go to a meeting, you've gotta do something else that you do need to do. But then sometimes you're gonna choose to put your kids absolutely first. And how you negotiate that and how often, maybe that internal compass is gonna help.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Such a good question. I think parenting sometimes is a little bit like a pendulum. Like your parents are really controlling, and so you tend to be a little bit more relaxed in your parenting, and then your kids may, I don't know.
Yeah.
So my parents, my mother, whom I just love with all my heart, tends to have all 10 fingers in all of her children's lives. She has 10 children, and there's a finger in each, and that's just the way she was and is and still is. And it was a little bit hard for me as a teenager because I felt like I had to, I just needed some space. I just felt like I needed some space. So I would say, if my husband were here, he would tell you that I am a softie. He'd say that I need to kind of toughen up on the rules. But anyway, it's a personality thing. But
and I'll say, my mom was the opposite. So I had no rules, and I kind of wondered, you actually love me? You don't have
That's
any
how my mom
rules.
was. She had no rules. And so now my mom has a ton. And my dad's parents had so many rules, and so he's the more laid back parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I see
You're getting the benefit of both.
I do. I think that's
and I would, excuse me, I would say there's not, I love what you said about trusting that compass. I think, I say trust your mother heart. Trust your mother heart of what it tells you that they need. I think an important thing is to remember why you're doing that and express it to your kids. And we have a fun situation right now at our house that we have 3 fainting goats. And we have a permanent chain link fence around them that is permanent. It's cemented in, it doesn't move. But we also have a temporary fence, and we move it around to block the things that we don't want them to eat that day, right? So I think in parenting, there's some of both of those. There's some things that the parent feels like, this is really something that is so important to us that I need you to know this isn't a negotiable, this is important to our family, and this is why. There are other things that I think can give a little. They can move a little bit. And that's when you're, like I've said to my kids, I don't know of anything good that happens on a date after midnight. I think you should be home at midnight. So I'm kind of setting a permanent fence there. And my kids will say, well, you know what, we're getting back from this at this time, and then we're gonna watch a movie. Do you think it would be okay if I'm back before 1 because it's a dance? And I'll go, you know what, that makes sense. Okay, why don't you let me know when you come in? And so I think there's this constant back and forth. I would say that there are not too many set in cement rules in our house, but we are talking about them all the time. And I think it's important to remember why you're doing it and to not act in a way when a rule is broken or an expectation is not met, to not act in a way that makes the child wonder if you love them. So that requires taking a breath before you respond. And so that's my best advice for parenting is, what do you do when your child gets an F? You breathe. Breathe first. What do you do when you find out that your child has, smoked a cigarette? Heaven forbid, right? But whatever, or that they've looked at pornography, or that they got up in the middle of the night and played video games, or that they ran off to a friend's house and didn't tell you, or whatever it is, you breathe. You just breathe and calm down before you react to them. And I think that has been really valuable to me, because then you're in a calm place where you can talk to them and say, you know what, I was really scared. When I got up in the middle of the night, you weren't there. It was like, that's really scary for a mom. And I just think being calm helps you talk through it, and they recognize that there was a boundary that shouldn't have been crossed, but they don't have to wonder
Why?
If you have stopped loving them.
Yeah.
Be like, why is that rule more important than how I feel?
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Did that help a little
Yes,
bit?
absolutely.
But you will react.
Yeah.
And you will freak out, and you will
Yes.
get mad. Then you're gonna say, okay, I gotta figure this out. So don't be upset with yourself.
Ethan's got something to say.
Well, and one thing, and then I'm gonna pass it here, is that when you do something that you're not proud of, which
You
I
can
think every
apologize.
parent does, cut yourself some slack. Like, treat yourself like you would your best friend. So when your best friend says, oh my word, I just was the worst mom, I get worst mom award today, and you'd say, oh, what'd you do? You know what, your kids know you. You know what, it's all right, you did a good thing. Because treat yourself that way. Cut yourself some slack, because you're not gonna do everything perfectly. And I feel like your kids learn so much. I love it when my husband does this, when I say, hey honey, I think that may have been a little harsh. And he'll go back and go, oh, I'm sorry, I overreacted. But and sometimes he'll get them a little gift. He'll write them a little note and say, I think I blew it today. Do you still love your daddy? Stuff like that, which I love, because it shows that he's human and I'm human, and it's okay to make those mistakes and say, I'm just finding my way, just like you will. And so, okay, you had it.
Yeah, so I actually there were some things that were said that actually reminded me of the time that I actually told my mom about how I was having problems with pornography, and it was outside. It was after an eye appointment, and I just kind of told her, and it was amazing, because if I remember correctly, the first thing she did was actually take a breath, and honestly, and it wasn't like a, okay, here we go. It was like a, okay, and she just started talking to me, and it was a very definite sense of she knew that I was trying my best, and she just wanted to know how she could help. And I think, at least in my perspective, in trying to overcome different things, the thing that has helped the most has been knowing that my mom's there to support me, and that she respects me as a separate individual, but somebody that she still wants to help, and she has made sure that me and my brothers know that she's there for us. And especially as we've gotten older, it's just like she's given us a lot of control over our lives, but she's still there, like guiding. And I'm not a parent, and I feel like ultimately grandparents end up being the experts, because they've gone through it, and then they get to watch their kids make mistakes and be like, actually maybe this. But as somebody who honestly has a really amazing mom, and I can't think of many things that I want to change over how she's done it.
What an awesome thing to say
Yeah,
about your mom. That's an amazing.
Yeah, I think
it's recorded
it's like a couple weeks late, but I think ultimately, yeah, it's just knowing that kids are future adults, and they're making decisions, and they're thinking, and they have agency over their lives, and it seems like respecting that while making sure that they know that you love them. And that's the ultimate thing that comes first, I think.
Can we make one more comment on that? I'm sorry, you go ahead because you haven't.
No,
Yeah,
talk
let's
on
go
that.
ahead,
I just-
Felicia, why don't-
I just have one little thing to add, and it was actually something that was brought up today in the conference, and that is kind of back to your question about how do you to ask questions. That as parents we tend to be lecture prone, and we tend to divulge all this information that is coming out of us and it needs to go into you, and it is a really great feeling on both sides when you ask questions. And I'm realizing that when I'm conscious about it, it makes for really great conversations between parents and children when you just ask questions and really listen to what they're saying. Like huge change in the tone of when you really ask questions. And I love a quote that someone shared today of questions provide the space for innovation to happen, but I think questions also provide
the hole for solutions to fall into.
I think questions also open that space to feel valued, to feel connected, to heal, to bond, to all of those things happen in that space after the question.
For the kid to tell you rather than you to tell the kid.
Right. And then that's feedback. When they tell me something, that really is my feedback. That is my jumping off place for where do we go next as a family, is how they respond to those
Because
questions.
I'm a youth mentor as well as Ethan, and so it's just a point where I know that oftentimes in questions, a lot of times we see very clear, like, we know what you need to do, but they need to figure it out for them to do it. And same thing with kids, I think, and kids and moms and dads. Like, if they feel like it's like their decision and they came up with it, and that you ask that question but they came up with the answer rather than you just telling them it, they'll respond a lot faster.
This motivation, they have this higher motivation. They go, okay, I'm excited about this. Yeah, awesome.
So I wanted to share another thing about, this goes along with what everyone said, is about communication. And when she was talking about communication, you were just like, yes, communication, communication. And with talking about parenting in the age, in the digital age, which originally was what this was all about. So,
sorry.
We are
good.
parenting in the digital age, so anything about parenting is there.
Right?
Yeah. But recognizing that our kids communicate in different ways. So going back to what you said about when you posted something onto Facebook, I'm old, and if I would have wanted to go there, I would have it would have had to been, I don't even know what would be public like that, putting it in ad in the paper. I have no idea. Thinking about when I used to communicate with my parents, and the ways that I might have communicated differently when things were hard to talk about. You know, my parents and I had good working relationships. We talked about things we needed to talk about, but if it was a really hard thing to talk about, sometimes it was just too hard to do it to their face, and maybe I would write my mom a letter or something, you know. And it might have been a thing where one of the speakers yesterday, when it was talking about his kid not drinking and getting his insurance paid for, said if it's a big thing, this is our rule, is we talk face to face and not online. Well, but sometimes it's a really big thing. And even though with my children, I feel like we always had very good talking relationships, my daughters and I. We talked about some big things, hard things. Sometimes, you know, we'd have to be like, have a sleepover, you know, like watch a movie, and then like midnight, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed. And then they'd be like, okay, but just for a minute, Mom, let me talk about this really huge thing.
And then like 4 hours later, you're fine. Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, but if it was a really big thing, even then, sometimes with that relationship laid and that communication that I thought was happening, my kids would communicate with me in a digital form in a way that I wouldn't do. Like my 20-year-old who was in college texted me to tell me she was pregnant. That is totally not our rules. Like that's it. I mean, I fell on the floor. Like what? But it wasn't because she didn't want to just talk to me. It was her way of like okay, I'm gonna do this way, offline, or not offline, online, but away from my mom, and then we can get in front of each other, and that's already passed. She gave me the ability to take a breath by using technology. And at first I thought, what the H, why couldn't she just come and tell me that? We have that relationship. But then I realized she gave me that. She gave me the ability to take a breath, and I needed it. And when she did come, she was like in the garage. She wasn't even away. She was like in the garage of my house. And I was like, am I supposed to respond? And so I did. I was like, okay, what do you do? And that's where that went. I said, okay. And then I got nothing for 10 minutes. And then she walked through the door and she was like, yeah, let's sit down and talk about it. But that was so different from anything that I would have ever thought of in parenting. And we have to realize that is the way it can work. So.
You had a question over here as well.
Sure. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say something. Yeah, so I feel like a big problem with why people kind of flee to teenagers kind of flee to technology these days is, like you guys were saying, kind of like their connections and really how they feel about their real life, and that's the reason people escape to games and technologies, because they don't like their real life, they want a different one, and so they go there. And I was wondering what you guys think is the best stuff to do. Like, I know a lot of people in the LDS community will say family home evening, always have your family home evening, but that always felt really forced until it was kind of unanimous that we actually all wanted to do something, and it wasn't like this forced kind of meeting on Monday, 7 o'clock, I was like, oh boy. And it started to become more like something that we all got excited to do, because it wasn't like a set day or anything. It didn't feel like a meeting, we'd go out and do something that we all actually wanted to do. And that really helped strengthening my relationships between my family. I was wondering what you guys think about that.
First of all, I think you answered your question.
Yeah. You solved your problem.
So if I can restate the question, it is, how do you help your family have connections that are deeper or more meaningful than the connection with, or than the escape to technology or fantasy or whatever? How can you balance that or make your real connections stronger? Is that it?
Almost like what's your favorite ideal fun things to do?
Fun question.
What do you like to do with your family to strengthen that relationship? To get them away from the computer or the phone and to get them to want to go do something with you.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
There you go, Ben. I got you.
It's been a while since I've had kids at home, so I'm gonna.
I can tell you one thing that we did.
So it was kind of a mixed technology thing, and my kids made me start doing it because they wanted to do their own online things or whatever. And the only thing I asked was on holidays or on one weekend day or evening or something that we do something together, and then we would all just sit around and stare at each other. And they made me do Just Dance on Wii. And it has become I told you my kids are in their 20s now, and they enjoyed so much making me do this dance to Wii. And I didn't want to do it, but they were like, Mom, come on, you at least know how to dance. You can do that. We still do that every holiday, and every time they're all together, we must all do it. Yeah.
So I did think of one. We play games, like board games.
Yeah, we do too.
So we kind of do that. But my daughter grew up. One of the traditions she has is watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with her dad and drinking root beer. So even today, she will come. She's 25. Come over. Hey, can we watch Star Trek and drink root beer? She'll bring the root beer. So I don't know. I think it can be just so many different things. But we do play Dominion.
I love
Dominion's a fun game.
That's my favorite.
And other games.
I'll look at it.
It's endless.
One thing that was really meaningful to me when I was growing up, was one-on-one time with my parents or with my siblings. So I was one of 10 children. So that was a pretty special thing if I got one-on-one time. And it didn't have to be something big. Often my dad would do that, and I didn't realize until I became an adult of what he was doing, that he was conscious about it. But he would say, I've got to run over to the store. Why don't you come with me? Will you come with me? And you would think that was like, woo, like I'm going on a date with Dad, because I never got time with him alone. And it was so fun. I would sit in the car and we'd go for a drive, and we'd talk about things, and we'd go pick up something at the store, and he'd let me pick out a treat, and then we'd come home. You know, it was like the simplest thing. But I loved that. So I really value any one-on-one time is pretty special in our family. And just a few weeks ago, I did that with my daughter. I realized I had been pulled in so many directions, and the leaves were so beautiful, and she had late start at school. And so I said, will you come? She doesn't like hikes, and I can't say the word hike. So I said, do you want to go for a walk in the mountains with me? And she was like, oh. And I said, you know what? We're going to go to Rich's Bagels. We're going to get some of that really yummy steel-cut oatmeal, and we're going to fill it up with fruit, and we're going to go find a space in the mountain, and we're going to sit on a rock and eat our oatmeal. And she's like, okay, that sounds, and so it wasn't a big deal, but that is something I think both of us will remember. There's something about trail talk when you're just walking and you just talk about things. The same thing happens, I think, when you sit in a swimming pool, you just talk, or you sit in front of a fire and you just talk. There's kind of those opportunities where there's really no place you have to be. So I think those are pretty special.
Yeah, that's great. And one thing I talk about in terms of like creating meaningful human connection, there's 3 key things, which is intention, space, and storytelling. And so all of those things, you created the space for you to just talk and share stories with one another and then create that meaningful human connection. But things that I do with my family, I play like heads up or catchphrase, apples to apples. Those are always fun. We like to go on walks. So, especially the weather's usually pretty nice. I live in California in the Bay Area, and so weather doesn't fluctuate too much. It's usually pretty nice walking weather, and we'll take the girls, my 2 nieces, they're 4 and 18 months with us, drive them around in their little toy cars. And then I also just enjoy, because my nieces are still really young, playing silly games where, we pretend to be, she'll be Wonder Woman and I'll be Batman, and we'll go try to get back bad guys and put them in jail, which is like the closet. Really fun.
Well, I think my husband who's here is actually really awesome at making like anytime fun family time. We read lots of books out loud. We go to the park and just have, split the family into teams and just have really good competitive games of soccer. We ride bikes, and we just like to hang out together. And I think that that's just because I attribute a lot of that to my husband's just personality of just hanging out and just playing good music and cooking together. And so anytime is fun. And I think what I have noticed though is that when we are on technology and we get pried off, and then there's a moment of resentment that people don't want to be pried off of technology. And in that space, if you don't make it enjoyable to be together as a family, people want to get back to that space. So I feel like once we call the kids out, for example, dinner time, so there's kind of a routine that I've noticed in our I homeschool. So we wake up in the morning, kids kind of have to clean their rooms generally, and we kind of make our way and have breakfast, and then we always have a spiritual connection time, which we just call our devotional. And then we do chores, and then we do our homeschool for the day, and then there's this great 2 hours, and that's where I have to hustle and get other work done. But they just kind of go and, hey, can I watch a little movie, or can I go do this? So that's kind of their tech time. Typically that's how our days go. And that gives me time to cook dinner. And sometimes pulling them out of that, they like resent it. And so I have to realize that once we're calling them up for dinner and they're like, if it's not like this enjoyable time where it's like, Dad's home, you know, and let's, like, this is what we're eating, can I, but if I'm nagging and like making it miserable, like the rest of the evening together is shot. So like all of these potential really awesome relationships that we could be building and all these great traditions are kind of go down the drain if that like in between time is really negative and pushy and naggy. The transition, exactly. So
let me ask you, that's a really good point. So what do you, sorry, can I ask her? So what do you do at that moment when you have to leave and go somewhere, and you don't have a lot of freedom or space to make it fun? Something's just got to happen. You just go with it.
I prepare little kids, especially, like, okay, so this is what's going to happen after. So like the transition time's already in the back of their mind, and then I try to give them some kind of a forward, like a look forward to this other thing that's just around the corner, to make it so that it's positive.
So it's not so abrupt.
You have to give them some prep to say, okay, so I'm gonna give you around 20 minutes to be doing this, but we have to get going to this other thing. And I know that, you know, but after that, we get to do this really awesome thing. But I just really want to say that anything can be fun family time, like anything. My husband has this awesome tradition. He's Hawaiian. He plays reggae music every Saturday, and we cook breakfast together. And the house smells like bacon, and it's kind of a mess after Friday night. We kind of get going together, and anything can be fun.
You don't have to be Hawaiian to play reggae music.
Yeah, but it's definitely for Saturdays. It's fun. But do you know what I mean? Like anything can be fun. Like let's take out the trash together, and like let's talk. I don't know. But if it's just,
it's true though.
I don't know. Like if it's just like, you know. But if you have that family culture of just like hanging out and having fun, really, you don't need to have like this special time. Like it just is what it is, you know. But you have to like really be intentional about that, and it takes, you know, attitudes of wanting to build that family culture already. Anyway.
Okay, so obviously we could do this all night. This is an amazing conversation. I think we've all been well fed. So I want to give you all a hand. And then, I'm sorry to cut out, but I said to keep it to about an hour because everybody's really tired. So I'm going to ask you to end it the way that we were asked to end the panel that I was on at the end of the summit last year. So this is going to be on the fly, but picture writing a tweet. I would like you to conclude with around 140 character tweet. Just a pithy summary statement that you want to end with. Okay, so I'll give you a minute just to think about that.
Does anybody have
a summary statement?
So imagine that you're writing a tweet, and just give us a verbal tweet to end our night and to end the summit for those of us who are here.
So no time for discussion among participants at this time towards the panelists, or are we done?
I've got one.
If you want to stay after, please. If you want to stay after, please do. I just didn't want it because we could do this for hours. So I'm going to draw the line here so that people feel like they can go if they want to, but the conversation continued. We're open. This is open till 9. So I will stay if you want to stay and chat. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. All right, Kristen, since you've got one.
And I do have to get going because I've got about an hour to drive. All right, and my caffeine level is running low. Okay. I was well caffeinated at the beginning of this, but it's running. So I would say we need to bring pornography out of the dark, where it has power, and into the light, where our children have power.
Yes.
Lovely.
Someone quoted me on that. I never remembered it. They put it in a meme, and they said, Kristen Jenson. I'm like, that's good. I'll use it. Did I say that?
I'll just say, and it's so weird to say this, as a veteran parent, that it doesn't matter how hard it may seem in the middle of things, your kids are always your kids, and you're always doing better than you think you are. And your kids might, I'm already over the characters. Your kids might
characters.
also in the moment maybe make you feel like you're not doing as good as you should. But when they are older and looking back at it, 9 times out of 10 will tell you that they didn't know even how you were doing it and you did great.
Thank you, Felicia.
Just like a video that you posted to Instagram or Twitter. Yeah, that's how that works.
Ethan.
There's technological workarounds.
Yeah,
we can figure it out.
Tweet. Yeah.
What would I say? And I think, oh, I had it just a second ago.
We can come back. Does somebody, do any of the 3 of you over here have one?
No, I think generally what I wanted to say was something along the lines of a few hashtags. And so something along the lines of like hashtag the opposite of addiction is connection, and hashtag porn kills love, and hashtag use tech for good. And also, let's get a selfie here.
Yeah.
No.
Nailed it. That was a good one, yeah.
Cool.
Instagram.
I think I would say kind of a similar thought to what you have, and that is that there is so much reason to have hope, and to believe in families, believe in the power of families, believe in the power of love. The little statement that says, people don't care how much they know, how much you know, until they know how much you care. And I think love really is it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bottom line. It's everything. It's the bottom and it's the top. And love covers up a lot of parenting mistakes, and it helps us recover from all sorts of things going on in our lives, and a lot of things going on around us. And I just, I think just keep that your focus. That love just needs to be the beginning and end.
Thanks, Deanna.
So I would say that people always say children are the future, but the children are also right now. So what are we doing to connect with these kids and involve them in what it is that we're doing? You can also say that children are the past, and a lot of brilliant minds have been wasted because they haven't been engaged with and connected in the right way. So always important to think about the past, the present, and the future.
Thanks, Gabi.
I would say that all of the tools that you need, and all of the tech tools that we have, the most sophisticated one is inside of us all, and we have access to that. And to just, listen to that internal, powerful compass that we have as it directs us in everything that we do with technology.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Kristen, thanks. Drive safely.
I'm just gonna give this to you, right? Yay.
So are you Ethan's mom? I'm glad you're able to do that.
What you getting?
I need